If you've noticed your varicose veins getting worse and you've just been blaming it on age, that's the part I want to change today, because what's actually driving the progression has very little to do with how old you are. It has to do with something most people do every single day. And once you understand what it's doing to the veins in your legs, a lot of other things start to make sense too. If you've also been dealing with legs that feel heavy and worn out by the afternoon, sleep that gets pulled apart by cramps, or that restless feeling you can't settle, or aching in the knees and hips that doesn't quite behave like ordinary arthritis, those things aren't as separate as they look. They connect back to the same root cause. And when you start moving that, you often start feeling it in more than one place. Let's start with what's actually happening in the veins. The veins in your legs have one job that's surprisingly hard. Push blood upward against gravity all the way back to your heart. And to do that, they depend on two things working together. The first is a series of tiny one-way valves. Think of them like trapdoors. They open to let blood pass through, then snap shut to stop it sliding back down. When they're working, blood moves steadily upward. When they start to fail, when those trapdoors stop closing all the way, blood leaks backward and pools in the lower legs. That's what varicose veins actually are, not a cosmetic issue. A sign that the valves have stopped doing their job and blood is sitting where it shouldn't. The second thing the veins depend on, and this is the part most people have never been told, is the calf muscles. Every step you take, the calf squeezes and acts like a pump, pushing that pooled blood back up toward the heart. In a healthy leg, this muscle pump reduces the pressure inside the veins by about 70% with every step. 70%, just from walking. When the veins start failing, that same walk only achieves about 20% pressure reduction. The pump is still running. It's just working at less than a third of its capacity. The valves aren't holding, so the moment you stop moving, blood slides back down, pressure climbs again, and over time, that sustained elevated pressure does something specific. It stretches the vein walls further, which causes more valves to fail, which causes more pooling, which causes more pressure. It's a cycle, and it feeds itself. Now pay attention to this part, because this is where the other things you might be feeling start to connect. When blood pools and pressure builds, oxygen delivery to the muscles drops. That's why the legs feel heavy and exhausted even when you haven't done much. The vein walls become inflamed, and that inflammation doesn't stay local. Research has confirmed it generates a low-grade whole-body inflammation that can worsen joint pain and fatigue well beyond the legs. And at night, when you're lying still and the calf pump shuts off entirely, that pressure and inflammation translate into the cramps, the restlessness, the itching that keeps pulling you out of sleep. One study that puts the progression in real terms, the Edinburgh Vein Study, tracking nearly 900 adults over 13 years, found that 57.8% of people with vein disease showed measurable deterioration, close to 4.5% per year, and nearly 1 in 3 people who started with just varicose veins went on to develop serious skin change complications that substantially raise the risk of leg ulcers. This doesn't stay where it is. It moves, quietly, gradually, which is exactly why understanding what's driving it matters more than most people realize. Here's what's more likely happening than aging. The calf pump that was keeping the pressure in your veins in check is getting less use than it used to. If you spent most of your working life on your feet, teaching, nursing, working a shop floor, doing any kind of physical work, your calf muscles were pumping all day long, every step, every hour. That constant movement was doing more for your leg circulation than you probably realized. And then the job ended, or the pace slowed, or the knees made moving around harder than it used to be. And now there are long stretches, hours sometimes, where you're sitting still. The pump that was quietly protecting your veins is largely switched off. The pressure it was managing is building hour by hour in exactly the wrong direction. This is why varicose veins so often get meaningfully worse after retirement. Not because of the age itself, because of what changes about how you move. I see this pattern constantly. Someone who was on their feet their whole career, had veins they'd been managing fine for years, and then within a year or two of retiring, things shifted noticeably. The veins didn't change, the movement did. Sitting is the main driver. Calf muscles go inactive, blood pools, pressure builds, and the already weakened valves go under sustained strain with nothing to relieve them. The cycle doesn't just continue, it accelerates. And a few other habits make it considerably worse. Crossing your legs, automatic for a lot of people, feels comfortable, partially compresses the vein behind the knee and restricts blood return at exactly the moment it's already struggling. The sodium problem is different but compounds the same issue. High salt causes the body to hold extra fluid, which raises the volume the veins have to manage and pushes pressure higher inside already strained walls. The accumulated salt in processed foods and canned goods does this quietly over the course of a day without ever feeling dramatic. Then there's hydration. When you're not drinking enough, blood thickens slightly, moves more slowly, and gives the compromised pump even less to work with. None of these are aging. Every one of them is a behavior, which means every one of them can change. So let's talk about what actually moves the needle. The single most important thing, with the most immediate effect on pressure in the veins, is reactivating the calf pump. Not with a gym program, not with equipment, just with deliberate movement built into the hours you're already sitting. Calf raises are the most direct way to do this. Standing, holding the back of a chair, or seated, heels flat, rise up onto the balls of your feet, lower back down. 20 repetitions, a few times a day, is enough to meaningfully activate the pump and push pooled blood back up the leg. The mechanism is exactly what your body was relying on every day you were on your feet. You're just recreating it deliberately now. Ankle circles work on the same principle. They engage the calf and drive blood return even from a chair. Short walking breaks, 5 minutes every hour, interrupt the pooling cycle before pressure has time to build. The goal isn't a long walk, it's frequent interruption of the sitting. Start with one of those. Do it every single day, not 3 days on and 4 off. Actually, that's the exact pattern that makes this fail. People do calf raises for a week, feel a little better, stop. The pump needs to become a habit, not a project. 10 repetitions every day will do more than 50 done occasionally. Consistency is the whole point. Alongside the movement, horse chestnut extract is worth knowing about. The active compound is aiacin. Placebo-controlled trials found that 50 milligrams twice a day was comparable to compression stockings for relieving leg heaviness, itching, swelling, and the tingling sensation in the lower legs, comparable to compression stockings, without having to pull them on every morning. Acin reinforces the capillary walls, cuts down on the fluid leakage that causes swelling, and helps the vein walls contract and hold tone against the pressure. Available on Amazon, typically under $20. Worth looking at, particularly if the heaviness and swelling are what's making your days harder. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you want to still be able to do? Because this is how people end up on the sidelines, not from one dramatic event, from 1,000 mornings where the legs felt too heavy, too unreliable, too painful to push through, from a walk around the block that gradually became a walk to the mailbox, and then eventually just to the end of the driveway. From standing in the kitchen long enough to cook a real meal, becoming something that had to be planned around how the legs were holding up that day. I hear from people in this situation all the time. Almost without exception, they say some version of the same thing. They thought it would stay manageable. They figured they'd deal with it properly later, and then later arrived, and the window had narrowed. The vein damage doesn't wait. The pooling, the pressure, the valve failure feeding more valve failure, it runs on its own timeline, quietly, without asking permission. But it is addressable. The same mechanism driving the progression is the one you have direct access to. The pump that's been underused, you can start using it again today. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to start interrupting the cycle instead of feeding it. One more thing most people already have at home: routine. It's a plant compound found in buckwheat, apples, and citrus. It strengthens the walls of the small veins and capillaries, reducing the fragility that leads to leaking and swelling, and helps the veins hold their shape against pressure. Decades of solid research on it. Buckwheat is the most concentrated source. Groats, tea, flour, all of it. Inexpensive, most grocery stores carry it. Apples with the skin on are another good source. And citrus, the fruit itself, not just the juice, because the rutin sits in the pith and membranes most people throw away. If dietary changes feel like too much to manage right now, rutin is also available as a supplement, usually under $15. It works on a different mechanism than the horse chestnut, which is why the research on using them together is particularly encouraging. Two more things that cost nothing. Leg elevation in the evening. When you're sitting and watching television, prop your feet up at or above the level of your heart. A pillow, a footstool, the arm of the sofa. Done consistently, it gives the veins a real window to drain, easing the pressure that's been building all day, reducing the overnight swelling, and often changing how the legs feel the next morning in ways people don't expect. And water. When you're not hydrated, blood moves more slowly, and the pump has less to work with. 8 glasses a day, easy to forget, worth remembering. So, the full picture. The reason varicose veins keep progressing for most people isn't primarily aging, it's inactivity shutting down the calf pump. Sitting letting pressure build unchecked. Habits compounding the damage quietly while the calendar takes the blame. And the heavy legs by afternoon, the broken sleep, the joint aching that doesn't behave like ordinary arthritis. Those aren't separate problems that all arrived at once. They're downstream of the same elevated pressure, the same low-grade inflammation traveling through the body, one root cause showing up in several places at the same time, which means moving the needle on one tends to move it on the others. Start with the calf raises, do them every day, pay attention not just to your legs, pay attention to your sleep, your energy, the joints. The ripple effects tend to show up somewhere you weren't watching. You've been managing this for a long time, probably without anyone explaining what was actually driving it. Now you know. That's where it starts. If this was useful, hit subscribe. I put out content like this regularly. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.